Well, good morning. Just while we're waiting for the last couple people to come in, I wanted to say hi and introduce myself. I'm Mark Balser, and I'm joined today by Gloria Shepard. Gloria and I study and train together, and I'm going to lead the first presentation. She's going to lead the second one. So if you want to ditch your second presentation, you'll get a completely different experience if you stick around. Just while we're settling in, I'm really excited that hopefully you got to choose from among the options here. So if you could just kind of throw out what made you choose the mindfulness presentation, what was interesting to you about it?
Really good for me.
Really good for you. That's a big one. Alejandro was just talking about the investment in students, and it really, we got to invest in the adults first. So this whole presentation today is going to be about mindfulness for you. We're really not going to share anything about how you can share that with your students, but you'll figure it out. You really need to practice it and experience it yourself if you want to teach it. But it's a great tool for self-care that can sit right next to, exercising, getting enough rest, being with friends and family, and mindfulness can sit right next to it. It's not the magic bullet and we're all going to go shave our heads and become monks and nuns. It's a tool in our tool belt for self-care and stress management. So my background is actually in finance. I spent 15 years running an investment firm. And exactly 5 years ago, I lost my father. And right around the time I lost my father, I also had a big HR problem at my business where I had to step up my management role. And at the same time, my wife had gallbladder issues and needed gallbladder surgery. Everything was going wrong all at the same time. So I stopped sleeping. That was a bummer. I was sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night, and I tried everything. I tried, soft music, warm milk, going for walks. I was running at 4:30 in the morning. It was all crazy, and nothing helped. And I was introduced to mindfulness, and while a lot of those kind of symptoms didn't really go away, my ability to live in that world where there was a lot of chaos going on became better. So I would lie in bed, and instead of saying, I'm tired, that means tomorrow I'm going to do a bad job at work and make bad decisions, then I'll lose my job, we'll lose our house, then my kids will be destitute, and so on. What I was doing instead was I was lying in bed and saying, well, I'm awake, and what else? I'm awake, I'm awake, I'm awake. And while I didn't start sleeping great right away, over the next couple of months, I started sleeping better and was really engaging in my life as opposed to kind of running away from it or fighting it. So today, I think we have a little bit of shortened time, but I want to give you at least 3 mindfulness practices that you can try out, yourself at home. So why don't we jump right into one? Mindfulness is a very gentle, kind of forgiving approach, and so the job is really just to be comfortable. So let's practice for 3 or 4 minutes. It might be supportive to put both feet flat on the floor. Upright posture, but you don't have to be off the back of the chair. Just really kind of center yourself, have some stability. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or just gaze gently downwards. And we'll do a practice called a movie in your mind. And so just gathering the state of affairs in your body, noticing any sensations, parts of your body that feel good or perhaps feel a little sore or tight. Noticing the environment around you, perhaps the air on your face. Any sounds you might hear. And as you become centered and perhaps relaxed, just imagine yourself sitting in a dark movie theater and looking at the screen. And you recognize it as the movie in your mind. Various images arriving, various images popping up on the screen. There might be talking. There might be thoughts and feelings. You might notice thoughts like, what am I doing? I'm just too busy for this. You might see your to-do list pop up on the screen. But also notice the space between those images and thoughts as you watch your mind. And recognizing a space between your awareness of those thoughts and the actual thoughts themselves as they come and go. There's a lot going on there, or maybe not, and that's all okay. And notice your active choice to explore this process. You might see stars appear on the screen, recurring characters, heroes and villains and angels, and the different circumstances of your life, tragedy and comedy, perhaps romance. And just taking a moment to give yourself appreciation for taking the time to explore your mind and opening your eyes to the sound of the bell. So, would anybody be comfortable sharing anything that came up for them as part of that practice? Was it quiet? Was it loud? Yeah, please.
I couldn't stop thinking about where my kids were right now because they don't have school and I'm here and forcing myself to try to relax, and I can't imagine if they're eating breakfast. Are they, they okay?
Isn't that interesting? And that's going on even when you're not totally cognizant of that. As you're going through your day, those thoughts are running through your mind even if you're not completely aware of them. Anybody else have any thoughts they wanted to mention or share?
It's very emotional. I don't know why, but I started crying.
Yeah, it's your experience, right? We don't have time to sit with that experience and explore that experience because we're moving through our day. So thank you for sharing that. So here's what we're going to do today. This was most of an introduction. I'll explain what mindfulness is to you. We'll talk a little bit about how mindfulness works, and we'll continue with practices, 3 additional practices. So my entire family is teachers. And so when I knew I was going to make this presentation, I said, tell me everything about teachers and teacher stress. And they told me a lot. And I had to go all the way back and be like, this isn't the worst job in the world. I'm about to teach here. So what do we got good going on with being teachers and being administrators and operating folks within schools? There's this Gallup survey they did a couple of years ago, and of course this was the survey that reported that teacher happiness is at like a 35-year low or something like that. But that was just one data point in this survey, and there were some really promising things about that survey. Teachers out of 14 professions have the second best life satisfaction, emotional health, and continuous learning. They get to use their strengths every day, and they talk about happiness and enjoyment and having smiled off and laughed a lot more than any other profession. So there's some great raw material in a classroom, that there's connection and there's meaning. So we've got that as a great start. But we're also constantly juggling. So this is where my in-laws came in. So they helped me define the job. So it's provide a safe, dynamic learning environment, customized to each student, with enthusiasm and care, regardless of time and resources. So am I missing anything? Kind of a good summary. So a recipe for stress. So there's a lot going on in our experience. Changing conflicting expectations, a tough schedule to deal with, and a curriculum we're expected to teach. Lots to do. Cultural perception of teachers, this slide right here. Maybe insufficient compensation, and everything else. So let me introduce you to Jon Kabat-Zinn. Has anybody ever heard of Jon Kabat-Zinn before, just by show of hands? So he's kind of the father of modern American secular mindfulness. And so I think he's the best person to start with for a definition. His definition is, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally, to the unfolding experience moment to moment. I mostly teach with adults, but I have also taught with youth as well, and I've found a probably simpler definition is paying curious attention to what's happening right now. That's mindfulness. Another way to define it is to talk about what mindfulness is not, because we have this conception, particularly in the popular media, as mindfulness and meditation also is just blissing out, that you're cool, calm, collected, empty your mind of thoughts, and it's really the opposite of that. Mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind or eliminating negative thoughts. It's about connecting to them. It's not about making things a certain way. So mindfulness can be easy, but it's not simple. I mean, if you can think of a friend who's just naturally mindful, it's because they do the simple things in life, and they enjoy the simple things. And it's not meditation, but it can be. So any time that you're having a singular focus can be mindfulness. So you're watching your child playing a sporting event, you're reading a book that you're really into, if you're focusing on that single thing. So mindfulness versus mindfulness practice. So mindfulness is like a state. Mindfulness is being here now, being present, that can be accessed. So I'm not thinking about the future, and I'm thinking about the present. I'm in the now. And some people are more naturally mindful than others. Mindfulness practice, on the other hand, is something that we can do that can literally change our brain. So there's this great science developing, studying mindfulness, and that we've got all these neural connections in our brain, and when we sit and we focus on our breathing, or we focus on our body, or we focus on our thoughts, or we focus on movement, that we're literally building new neural connections and strengthening connections that can help us be more self-compassionate, be more empathetic, and feel better about ourselves. Mindfulness uses the material of our life for practice. So I remember I went to Haverford College and I ran cross country, and we wanted to be like the Russians, and so we cut ping pong balls in half, and we put the ping pong balls in our eyes, and we lied down for 20 minutes or so, and it really helped with concentration and focus while you were doing that. But when you're out on a cross country course in a run, the ping pong balls in your eyes aren't going to help you anymore. But mindfulness, I can count my breath. I can pay attention to the sensations in my body while I'm running, while I'm in a classroom that's chaotic or hectic. So we're going to try on a little mindfulness practice. Benefits of mindfulness, particularly with consistent practice. Most of the mindfulness-based stress programs are about 8 weeks, and very, very consistent results of 15% or so decrease in stress and anxiety. Reduced reactivity, that was a big thing for me. When I wasn't sleeping, I was reacting like, oh, I need to do something to get myself to sleep. When I let go of that reactivity is when I really started sleeping again. And it can really help with focus as well, because when we're under stress, we put these blinders on and we kind of foreclose other possibilities. So fight, flight, and freeze. All of this is normal. All of our reaction to stress is normal, and it's how we're engineered as humans. We're engineered for 10 or 15,000 years ago when we were being chased by tigers, and that was a threat to our survival. So our our inner brain, our reptilian brain, has an amygdala that says, this is a threat. You need to do something right now. So we're really good at seeing a stimulus and reacting right away. When a tiger's chasing us, we have to do that. We can't think, well, maybe it is a tiger, maybe it isn't, I don't know, because we're going to be eaten. Our threats today, for the most part, are emotional. They're egoic threats. But we have the same system to alert us of threats. So with mindfulness, we take this chaotic classroom. It says that it looks like you have everything under control, and there's a kid with a garbage can on his head. And so what we're training ourselves to do with mindfulness is create a space between that stimulus that feels like a tiger's chasing us after us and our response. So my son is not very good at washing the dishes. So every time I come into the kitchen, I see dirty dishes in the sink, I think, oh, like there's a threat to my survival. And it's really not that. There's a response that might be necessary to talk to him, like, hey, I asked you to do the dishes, but I don't need to act like the tiger's chasing after me. I can give myself the time to respond. So why don't we try another reflection? This will be a little gentler. But if you can think of something that kind of triggers you, a stress response that you have that's kind of repetitive, that you had over your life, it could be, something that kids do, or a student does, or some way your spouse annoys you, and that you usually react habitually. If you can kind of bring that to mind, you can gaze down or close your eyes, and I'm going to offer a couple of questions that can bring up mindfulness for you. So just bringing to mind that trigger might be coming home to a dirty sink. It might be getting stuck in traffic and what your normal reaction is to that. Snapping at a child, tailgating the person in front of you. And just play that out in your mind. Imagine that scenario and notice your reaction. And then ask yourself the following question. What am I doing? What am I doing? Is it right? Is it right? What will I do next? What will I do next? And so you might want to play that scenario, kind of press the play button and allow it to happen again, that trigger that gets you, and explore your response this time. You might ask again, what am I doing? Is it right? What will I do next? So you can open your eyes as you're ready, and just perhaps reflecting on that. I love that, those three questions as kind of a mindfulness informal break as you're going out throughout your day, because it's really not telling you what to do. With my son, what am I doing? I'm snapping at my son. Is it right? Well, I'm being a little hard on him. What will I do next? You know what? I really want him to do the dishes. I'm going to keep snapping on him. But as I play those questions out over and over again, I eventually I choose my own response to that situation. Does that make sense? Does that ring a bell? Does anybody have any kind of reflections on that practice that you might want to share? Please.
I realized I triggered like sounds or sort of did not react every time.
Wow. So you're really making the space. You're stretching the stimulus and response apart. So they might continue to do it. You might continue to bother, but you're letting them play it out, and then responding thoughtfully instead of reacting habitually. So I love this idea of kind of thinking of myself as a caveman, of like, oh, I'm annoyed right now because my body's doing what it's supposed to do, but maybe in this situation I don't need to react the way my body wants me to. So our stress responses, for the most part, our stress responses are fight, flight, or freeze. So we overwork, we're perfectionists to fix this problem, kind of engage and fight, or we kind of get out of that situation. We watch television and eat, drink, smoke. Maybe we ignore, yell, or fight. Mindfulness is a different approach. It's about being with our experience. So here's a guy, he might be meditating in a train station. There's chaos all around him. So it's about having awareness of what's going on, exploring how it feels in your body, having a little balance. So right now I'm going to react, but the next time it comes up, maybe not. This time I'm going to let it slide, let the dishes pile up in the sink and see what happens. And just kind of a understanding that everything changes. So every situation isn't going to play out exactly the same. I love this quote from Jack Kornfield, "Be aware of the waves and rest seated in the midst of them." So what happens to our body when we're triggered by stress? You probably know about this, but our blood moves all through our body. Our energy moves throughout our body. So we're triggered, and we have this parasympathetic kind of nervous system response of all hands on deck. So blood goes to your legs so you can run. Blood's diverted from your stomach because you don't need any digestion when you're running away from the tiger. And it also drains out of our head as well. So we're not as smart. And so that gives us fewer options. It causes us to have to kind of have a knee-jerk response because we're not including our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, in our response. This is kind of jumping right in, but would you mind sharing the hand model? Apologize. Dan Siegel, which wrote Brainstorm, Whole Brain Child, has this great model of the brain and how we can integrate the pieces of it.
So the audio quality of the hand model of the brain explanation in the live recording wasn't so great, so I thought I'd take it offline and walk through the hand model of the brain with you right now. Just kind of seeing how our brain works in times of stress can be helpful. In a sense, seeing what's happening in our brain visually might allow us to be able to change that. So Dan Siegel, the author and neuroscientist, popularized this hand model of the brain, and you can even just take your hand out in front of you. And so this is kind of a model of your brain. Your forearm and up through your wrist is the brainstem, that very basic primitive brain that kind of does regulatory functions in your system. And then take your thumb and just place it on the inside of your palm. And that's your limbic system, your emotional system. That's where we have our amygdala, that stress response element of our brain, and our hippocampus, which does a lot of the control functions. And then our fingers, we can just kind of curl that over the thumb to make a fist. And so that's a simple model of our brain. The fingers wrapped around your thumb are our cortex, the thinking and reasoning part of our brain. And then the knuckles facing out are an example of our prefrontal cortex. And that prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of our human brain, is responsible for regulating the limbic system and our brainstem. And that the whole cortex is our thinking, reasoning brain. And so what happens when we're under stress is our amygdala activates, our limbic system, our emotional system, and our brainstem start kind of vibrating. So you can imagine your thumb in that fist there kind of vibrating. And as we get more and more stressed and cortisol's going through our body, the connection between our fingers that represent our cortex and prefrontal cortex and the rest of our brain kind of disconnects. So you can imagine opening your hand, and in the most extreme situations, we flip our lid. So if you just kind of bring those four fingers up, all of a sudden, your prefrontal cortex, which regulates your emotional and brainstem part of your brain, are no longer connected to your cortex. So you lose the capabilities of that thinking brain, the flexibility, the creativity, even moral reasoning. Essentially, you're activating fight or flight to keep yourself alive, whether it's a physical threat or an emotional threat. And so through mindfulness, one of the things we're trying to do is bring that rational thinking brain back online, bring those fingers back over the amygdala. And it's, to me, a really powerful model. Adolescents, in general, don't have very strong connections between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain, the limbic system and the brainstem. So when they're under stress, it's much easier to flip your lid. As adults, we have built some connections that make that a little bit harder at first, but of course we can all flip our lid. And through mindfulness and through the neuroscientific research, we're starting to see that those connections between our prefrontal cortex and our limbic system can be strengthened through mindfulness practice. So that's the hand model of the brain. Back to the talk.
Yeah.
I love that concept of flipping your lid. And if you compare it to physical exercise, like you don't just sign up for the Broad Street Run and go in it. You train and you build your muscles in your body. And mindfulness practice, this concept called neuroplasticity, that we're like changing our brain, is kind of tightening the connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and your brainstem, so that when it's kind of your amygdala saying time to flip your lid, you got your prefrontal cortex saying maybe not, and so it's, there's a tighter link there. So we have about 20 minutes or so left. I'd love to try a more extended practice of 10 or 15 minutes or so of a body scan. So the typical mindfulness practices that you can do are at home. There's focused breathing, there's body scan, there's mindful movement, and there's mindful walking, which is pretty much paying attention to your breath as you're walking back and forth. And then, of course, there's all these informal practices like those 3 questions: what am I doing? Is it right? What will I do next? And I'll send you home with 2 additional practices. So again, this is mindfulness. So make yourself comfortable. If you don't feel like closing your eyes, you don't have to close your eyes. If the guidance I'm providing to you isn't working for you, do your own thing. Get up, grab a drink of water. This is really meant to be for you. So I'm going to find myself a chair as well. Oh, I think I'll move this over. And so the body scan isn't meant to really accomplish or achieve anything. We don't have a big goal. We're just kind of being aware of our experience. So there's no need to try to make it a certain way or judge yourself, I'm doing it wrong. If you're thinking I'm doing it wrong, that probably means you're doing it right. Because those are just normal thoughts that come through your brain as the day progresses. So let's take 10 or 12 minutes or so, and I'll guide you through a traditional body scan practice. And like I said, take care of yourself as you need to. So closing your eyes, noticing your body in space, the weight of your bottom on the chair, gravity holding you to the earth, your feet where they contact the floor. You might bring your awareness to your breathing, noticing the cycle of the air coming in and out, your belly rising and falling. Noticing any sensations in your body. Aware of any thoughts or feelings that might be coming up. And you might draw your attention down to your feet, to your left big toe. And bringing your awareness to the left toe. Just notice anything that might come up or not. And moving to the rest of your toes, all the way to the little left toe. Now drawing your attention to your right big toe. And again, the rest of the toes to your right pinky toe. And moving along to an awareness of both feet, the arches, the heel, the top of the foot. You might sense the space inside of your foot, the volume. And moving now to your ankles. And your shins. Your calf, being aware of their length and shape and size, giving your full attention and focus to your lower leg. You might notice you've become distracted, following a thought or a feeling, and that's totally okay. As you notice those distractions, just gently return your attention to your lower leg, your awareness of your experience. Moving now to both knees. And your upper leg, your thigh. Noticing what comes up. Moving now to your hips, your pelvis, bringing them to your attention. And just allowing your experience, whatever comes up, returning to your body. Your abdomen, your stomach, all your internal organs. Moving up to your chest, your rib cage. And perhaps noticing the sensation of breathing. The inhale, the exhale. This process continues with very little effort on your part. You might bring your attention to your heart, perhaps feeling the sensation of it beating or pulse throughout your body. Moving up towards your shoulders, an area where we hold much of our tension. You might allow that to relax, your shoulders to lower. And moving down your arms, your upper arm, and your elbow, lower arm and forearm. Your wrist and your hands. Perhaps noticing the feeling of your hands and fingertips touching your clothing or each other. Noticing how that feels, perhaps warm, moist, relaxed. Moving now to your lower back, another area of tension, and just allow the feelings that come up. Moving to the mid-back and the upper back. Through the shoulders and the neck. Moving to your jaw. Releasing your jaw and relaxing your mouth, your lips, your tongue. Your cheeks, your ears and your nose, your eyelids and your eyes. Moving now to your forehead, your eyebrows, from the crown of your head. And expanding your awareness now to include your entire body. The breath, the heartbeat, all the dancing sensations that makes up your life. And perhaps lengthening and deepening your breath. Breathing intentionally and deeply. And opening your eyes to the sound of the bell. So thank you for practicing mindfulness with me. I want to give 2 or 3 minutes, maybe if you can turn to the person next to you or even 3 people, and just share one thing that came up for you, something that was interesting or unusual, and I'll come back to the room in 2 minutes or so. So, yeah, that's great to recognize. And, don't believe anything I say. Believe it from your own experience of practicing it. So, for me, all I do is focus breathing. I almost never do body scans. There are other people who all they do is yoga and movement. So find what works for you as you explore this and do more of it. It's exciting. Yeah, there's such a neat evolution, and that you do things a certain way, and it's not working anymore. And you try something else, and you're like, oh, this is interesting, and then it's an experiment of our life. It's really exciting. We get to do. I'll just wrap up with 1 or 2 more slides. This neuroplasticity stuff is really exciting, but Alejandro showed slides with studies with 70,000 participants in the study. That's stunning to me. The research on mindfulness is being done 20 people, 50 people, 100 people at a time. So, some people think that practicing mindfulness grows our prefrontal cortex, gray matter. I think that's probably the case. But they're also finding studies where it shrinks it. But directionally, we're moving towards that. We just don't know anything. We've just started. And also that it might shrink the amygdala, which is our kind of that fight or flight machine. They definitely know that it can lead to less physical inflammation, so health issues. And they're studying decreased cortisol levels. So mindfulness meditators in particular are releasing a lot of natural oxytocin and a little bit less cortisol. The other thing is that it's regulated more. So you might have a high level of stress, but it's not like spiking back and forth and back and forth. If you're a brain surgeon, you probably have a high level of stress. That's natural, but that you're not kind of subject to the whims of your brain. So all this stuff is bringing our prefrontal cortex back online, unpopping our top. Great book, Emotional Life of Your Brain. So that's pretty much it. This stuff is contagious. So like Alejandro was saying, happy teachers change the world. Our own self-care has an impact on others. I'm sure you know that, but you have to prove it to yourself. There's a great study that I saw recently where they trained therapists in mindfulness meditation as they were up in training. And the individuals who had been trained in mindfulness meditation but weren't sharing it in any of their therapy were seeing 30% better psychological outcomes than those that weren't. So you don't even need to teach mindfulness in your classroom to have an impact on your classroom. Willoughby Britton studied that. That I can't remember exactly, but if you have a mindfulness practice but don't teach it at all, you have similar outcome results in terms of academic performance and emotional regulation in the classroom than if you don't practice mindfulness but do teach it in the classroom. So that's pretty much it. Gloria has some handouts with resources. So I've got 2 practices for you, some great books, This presentation, all kinds of stuff, is on my website, which is called yourmindfulcoach.com. But I'm really excited to be coming here, starting in March, to take over Sarah Stern's classroom. So if you have any questions, ask her, ask Sharon, find me through this sheet. So we'll be here for 15 more minutes. I want to give you a break. Thank you. And please ask me if you have any questions.